We are here with James Henson, professor at the University of Texas, and we're going to talk about how politics in the U.S. are changing, especially today when we are just 1 week away from the elections. Mr. Henson, can you tell us a little bit about this election? What are your impressions, and what are the issues that are shaping the course of the events in this election?
I'm happy to be here, sure. The overwhelming issue in the American election right now, the economy, as you well know, the economy has been slow to recover after the crash of 2008, and in the parlance of American politics, it's a discussion predominantly about the economy, jobs, and then federal spending, and some combination of those issues are driving almost all of the discourse. A couple of things have come up, in the interim. Events in Libya might have helped the Romney campaign around the edges a little bit. It gets really more about the Obama campaign's communication on that than it is the substance itself that gave the Romney campaign some leverage on that. But for the most part, it's been all economy all the time, and then of course the usual personality issues about competence, trust, etc. And in that sense, I think you've got an interesting dynamic between an electorate that is coming to view Mitt Romney with a bit more trust, but still feels that Obama connects with them and understands them in terms of empathy much better.
But sure, the candidates also try to approach some minorities and some groups in particular. I'm referring, of course, to the choice of Obama in the last few months about gay issues, about homosexual marriages. I'm talking, of course, about the Latino voters and all the issues regarding immigration. How are the two candidates trying to approach those minorities?
Well, I think there are a couple of different facets to this. On one hand, you mentioned, I think very insightfully, the idea that the Obama campaign made a concerted effort to reach out to groups that we think of here in the two-party American system as the foundation of the Democratic Party: ethnic minorities, urban voters, gay and lesbian voters. And so you saw a series of policy moves that used the executive branch, the executive branch's initiative to appeal to each of those groups in the run-up to the election, and much of that really happened last spring and early summer. Now, in the aftermath of that, certainly Governor Romney has had to try to moderate positions in some of those areas, but he's a bit hamstrung by the conservatism of his base. Now, that's one dimension, is sort of the battle over Democratic constituencies. The overarching issue there is the matter of demographics. And the Latino population in the United States is expanding rapidly for a number of reasons. Some of this is immigration, but some of this is also basically the high birth rates of Latino families compared to other ethnic groups, particularly Anglos and African Americans. So what this has meant on the ground has been wanting to hang on to a conservative base that is restrictive and Republican, but trying to not alienate too many Latino voters so that Republicans can get, if not a majority, which I don't think anybody thinks they can get, but that they can at least maintain or perhaps slightly increase their plurality. Or, as some would say, and some would say that there's also an effort by Republicans to sort of suppress the turnout in local areas among those Latino groups. For the Obama campaign, it's been a matter of not only trying to keep the Latino vote, but trying to energize that base. The Obama campaign ran very strongly with Latinos in 2008, but the problem is that Latinos have generally a low turnout rate. Part of that is a matter of political culture. Part of that is the youth of the overall population. Where we're really seeing the explosion in Latino voters is among younger voters, and younger voters in the United States vote in comparatively much smaller numbers. So what you've seen the Obama campaign do is try to mobilize those groups, in particular in the handful of states where they think that these voters can make a difference: Colorado, Florida, Nevada, to a lesser extent New Mexico, Arizona.
So, how do you think? What do you think will happen in the future with these minorities, such as the Latino minorities? How do they will they reshape American politics in the future? Is there any path that is foreseeable?
Well, I think there's a few paths that are foreseeable, and we haven't really come, I think, if you will, to the fork in the road that will tell us exactly what's going to happen. On one hand, I think the most kind of conservative, intellectually conservative prediction would be that Latinos continue to vote in about the numbers they're voting now, that we don't see a fundamental shift in voting patterns among either on the basis of ethnicity or age. And in that path, the Democratic Party makes some significant gains, but while that's happening, the Republican Party also makes some inroads, so that we go from something like a 60 to 65% Latino vote for Democrats to something more like 55 to 60. Some states become more strongly Democratic. Other states become more competitive. Another fork is that what the Democrats are saying will happens. That is, this Latino sort of surge in population translates into a surge in voting. The Democrats do a good job of both hanging on to those voters and increasing their voting rates. And you see, a lot of places that are, seemingly majority locks for the Republican Party turning to the Democratic Party. And then I think the least likely scenario is that the Republican Party, successfully moves to the middle, attracts, larger numbers of Latinos, not just traditional Republican voting groups, older voters, small business people, etc., but manages somehow to attract younger Latinos into the party. And we don't see much change because Republicans achieve parity. I think, honestly, the most likely scenario in the next decade is probably that first scenario, the most conservative intellectual scenario, if you will, in which you don't see any kind of fundamental earthquake in people's political cognition and their voting patterns. But all things being equal, it creates advantages in some places for the Democrats.
Well, one last question. Of course, now just 1 week before the elections, we see that basically there are just a bunch of states still in play: Ohio, Virginia, Florida. It is usually those states who end up to decide the election. And of course, some states like Texas will always, well, not always, but we certainly go to the Republicans, while California will go to the Democrats. Why do we have such states as Ohio, for instance, that pretty much are always undecided?
Well, I think what drives the states being in play, or the states being undecided, is really just a function of the underlying partisan structure in each of those states. It's not so much that they're undecided, it's that they're closely divided. And so what you get is a two-prong attack by the campaigns. On one hand, there's the conventional wisdom, which is that there's this group of undecided voters that are really going to turn the election, and certainly the campaigns would like to appeal to those voters and win those voters over. But more and more what we've seen is that, the thrust of the campaign efforts, particularly in this cycle, has been to more specifically identify partisans on each side that are on the margins of voting, and to make sure you reach those people and you get them out to vote. So what you do is you mobilize a kind of untapped base, and in a lot of ways this is, I think, the less frequently recognized part of this story is that there is a big well of non-voters in the United States, and a lot of those non-voters have partisan attitudes, but those partisan attitudes don't translate into votes. So technology has enabled American parties, both technologies and the use of data, to much more effectively target those voters and get them out to vote.
Well, thanks a lot for being with us. Thanks a lot for this interview, and I hope to speak with you again maybe for the next election in 2016.
It was good to see you again, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.